And we're back with me, Johnny McMurray, on the On the Spot Football Podcast with one of the busiest goalkeepers that I've had the pleasure of being in a team with. A man with his fingers in all sorts of gloves and one of the biggest goalkeeping academies in the country. Michael Dougherty. Michael, how are you?
Brilliant. Yeah, pleasure to be here. It's been a while in the making, hasn't it? I've cancelled twice.
You have. You let me know twice.
I did. Sorry about that. But no, really happy to be here. Looking forward to it.
Well, you're a busy man at the minute. You're still out there. You're still coaching. Nice things.
Good. Longest serving member of the first team staff. Who'd have thought it when I joined there? So no, it's been good. Going on 3 years there now. So I've seen everything, all the comes and goings, highs and lows already in such a short space of time. Came so close a couple of times, but no, really enjoying it. Obviously flat out with from first team right down to academy and coaches and everything in between, but wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, listen, thank you for coming on. As you say, you've touched on, you've cancelled on me twice, which I won't let people forget here, obviously. But it's I do want you on. We've had a lot of good memories together. We've had a lot of good times, and I think that's about time that we let people know about these things in your career. So, maybe what I want to do is I want to touch on a few things just to start off. But grew up in East Belfast.
Yeah.
East Belfast lad. Talk to me about that.
Brilliant. Really, really good childhood. My mum brought me and my two brothers and my sister up. Done an unbelievable job with the four of us. You wouldn't think that looking at me now, but Neefy did.
Hardly ever.
Massive credit to her. The hours she put in and working multiple jobs that had everything you wanted. So, but ultimately, growing up, as I said the year before, you could see the oval from our house, and going back, a child of the 80s. I don't remember too many kids that, wanted to be nuclear physicists and astronauts and all this. Everyone wanted to be footballers. And if you grew up in East Belfast or Sydenham, where I grew up from, you wanted to play for Glentoran. And I was no different. My granddad used to take me to the oval, home and away. My two granddads actually, from 4 years of age.
Right.
So literally born into it. Robert Craig, who was a legend for Glentoran. His parents lived next door, and he was a regular visitor to the street. And even to have a first team player at that age to look up to as a real father figure and spending time with you was probably all I needed to go on and wear the red, green and black.
So as a kid, you grew up in East Belfast. You're a big Glentoran fan, as you say. Did you play for Glentoran as a kid then?
Yeah, so Ashfield was a big part of my life. Obviously, Ashfield School. A massive history in developing footballers and international managers.
The school's huge. It's a big boys' school. Obviously, there's boys and a girls' school there, but the boys' school could always compete on a football front. It was mental. Yeah,
they were always right up there. And probably for me, the people that I went to school with and went on to play through the academy with and then first team with, and you're still friends for life. Andy Kirks and Paul Lehmans, Stuart Elliott and people like that. So with a real good school team. Warren Feeney was there too.
Just a few legends.
Brilliant time. Andy McMorran obviously come on as our headmaster and was different. Yeah. But no, turned the school around, and it was always a football school. But probably paved the way for us, to be honest, in how he taught and how he treated you as a person and as a young man. He was inspirational actually. But going into that Glentoran Academy and probably the first funny story. So me and Andy Kirk grew up together, and every day amongst many friends would have been round the park, and everyone's taking their turn in goals. One day I was in his house after school, and his dad Paul Kirk, who was manager of one of the youth teams, had said, we need to get a goalkeeper. We've lost our goalkeeper. And I said, I'll do it. And I played out for the school.
Yeah.
I was centre forward. I'd never done goals in my life. And some people are probably looking back saying, we know. But
well, yeah, we would, I'd say, because
So I actually went and borrowed a pair of gloves.
Right.
Paul was like, "You're a goalkeeper?" I said, "Yeah, I've been playing for a couple of years in nets." I was 14 at the time or something, 15, and went to training that night, Glentoran training as a goalkeeper, and completely blagged my way in. It was unbelievable. And from then on in, we all enjoyed doing this. Everyone took their turn, and I think deep down in there somewhere it was there waiting to come out. So from that point on, it was me hooked. I was a goalkeeper the whole way through.
I always find that strange, just as you touched on there, at some stage every kid always wants to be a goalkeeper or always wants to do nets and just dive around and just be a mucky kid, do you know what I mean, covered in dirt playing on a Saturday.
But not even kids. Like, you think back when we trained together and boys were asking you to put your gloves on and
I was torching you every Friday.
Jump in for penalties and free kicks. And I think it helps is, you know, when you're at that level of playing, I think you get a wee bit more credit from people too, that they think it is still a muck around or a playground job, and they go in and then realise the balls are moving.
And these nets are massive. And I actually have to dive and do stuff.
Yeah. So, and anyone that jumps in front of football, like they get hit by it, is not right in the head clearly. So that'll explain a few things as we go on as well.
So this goalkeeper union that everybody talks about, this GKU or whatever you weirdos have it, you all have to be a bit mental.
Yeah, it's a strange one because I don't know if it exists the way people think it exists. Right. That all goalkeepers love each other and look after each other. Like, I've been very lucky to have some really, really good goalkeepers amongst me at clubs. Sean O'Neill, Connor Devlin, Elliot. I wouldn't have put Elliot in that class. He's had his moments like we all have, but
yes,
we wouldn't put him in the same bracket as Sean and Connor in terms of madness.
Yeah, just being nuts. Yeah,
but I think it's more down to the person and how you kind of click with them and the relationship you have on and off the pitch. That's a union, and you look after each other. And if you're in, they actually want you to do well. It's weird.
Yeah.
And I think the other way, and I've only experienced it once, where I had a goalkeeper that you could feel it. He didn't want you to do well. You could feel it on the training pitch, and you could feel it on the Saturday. And when I look back, that relationship probably wasn't there either. And we're just two totally different people, and ultimately wanted to play ahead of the other one.
But see, whenever you talk about that, and you talk about, it's a very small group. So if you're a goalkeeping coach the way you are now, you've got Brian Maher, who's your number one at Derry.
Yep.
And you've got a number two and potentially number three. How can they sit as a number two and number three and just want that person to do so well? Is it because they know that he's better? Or
it's different. I mean, I knew my place at times, certainly later on in my career when I was signed as a number two to go in and play a certain amount of games.
But is that not age?
Yeah, it is. But for young goalkeepers, for me, I always thought I was the best.
Yeah.
And I wasn't shy and telling people that. And again, looking back, did you do enough to prove it? Probably not at times. But the modern day young goalkeepers, it's the number two is the hardest position at the club.
Yeah.
Because you're training all week to prepare to play in a game, and you know deep down that you're not playing. And it's like, I admire those types of goalkeepers that give you absolutely everything. As a coach, it's difficult, but you know, you've got to give them the same treatment as you give the number one. You've got to spend time with them off the pitch. You've got to go for coffees because you want to, not because you have to.
Yeah.
And build that relationship, and then they kind of trust more in the process of you're trying to develop them, you're trying to get them ready. And ultimately when that time comes, you want them and need them to perform because that's their chance. And I was one of those goalkeepers many a times as a two waiting to get in, and it's all about being ready and taking that chance. And at times did I have a goalkeeping coach that looked after me that way? It probably wasn't. That wasn't the way life was then. I think goalkeeping coaches now are different.
Bit more old school, where it was tough and that was
up and down, hard work, and see you on Tuesday, see you on Thursday, see you on Saturday, see you next week. There's no communication away from football. Now it's totally different. Spend more time with these boys you do with your family. So, no, it's a tough job, but one I admire very much.
Well, I don't want to touch on that too much because I want to obviously stick to you and what you're doing, obviously. So I want to bring it right back to when you started. You touched on there that you're a Glentoran lad. You grew up, you wanted to play for the Glens. That was your goal. And the academy team that you had at the time was full of legends. Talk to me about the academy team that you had and the success that you ended up having.
It was ridiculous, and Paul Kirk obviously had a massive part to play in the way he coached. He was miles ahead of anything. He was a visionary. He was bringing things into the game that weren't seen for 10, 15 years later. But you touched on Andy Kirk, Stuart Elliott, Paul Lehman, Gareth Graham, who went on to play for Crystal Palace, Ricky Kerr. It was unbelievable. You were literally beating teams 6, 7, 8, 9 every week.
Yeah.
One thing that Paul did really well was, again, it wasn't just that 11. People were rotated even then. People were playing different positions. There was time that Lieber was going and playing on the left side or playing the right side. And I look back and things that helped them boys as they went further on in their career, playing in multiple positions, and a respect for other people's positions as well. But when you look back now, I know to some people you say, academy medals or youth team medals don't really mean that much, but for us it did.
Yeah.
Because we were all Glentoran fans and Glentoran kids, and that's all we wanted to do. And you look back and you've probably 8, 9, 10 medals from that period, and you're winning everything. Ultimately, the goal was to get into the first team. Those boys managed to do it before me, which, looking back, probably hurt me a wee bit.
Right, okay.
But also appreciating that I wasn't ready, and being a goalkeeper, you were less likely to get thrown in.
Yeah.
Than what those boys were. You can stick a 16-year-old, 17-year-old striker on. Paul Kirk actually took me at 16. In those days, you could do emergency loans. He left Glentoran to take a Distillery job, and they were playing in the first division. And I can't really remember the instance, but somebody was suspended, somebody was injured, and the other goalkeeper's wife went into labour, and it literally was an emergency that they needed somebody. So I went and signed for Distillery at 16,
Right, okay.
and played for a month, and played 3 first team games and kept 3 clean sheets.
No way.
Which was unbelievable.
Yeah.
I don't think that helped me coming back, because you
were ready to go
through the door.
Yeah, you were ready to say,
and I was knocking on the manager's office. Honestly, one of the best stories, and ultimately it was me ending me there at that point in time. But the team used to go up on the door. I had the Glentoran first team. I would have trained with the first team, and Decky Devine was somebody I looked up to, now the manager, and spent time with these people. We're very, very lucky to be around them. And Alan Dornan me coming in later years, stuff like that. But the team used to go up, and I looked at the board and looked at the team on the back of the change room door, expecting to be in it for the first game of the season.
Right.
Honestly thinking, I've just went to the Distillery.
I'm back.
Right, I'm back, and now I'm back, and I've been training, I've done pre-season. Right, and I'm looking at it, and the boys latched onto this, John Devines and Chris Walkers and John Kennedys, total legends at Glentoran. And the boys were like, "You're not on it?" It's like, "No, it's a joke. It is a joke, we should be on it." Right, go and see the gaffer.
I'll do that.
Should I? Go and see him. I'd be 100%. Go and see him. So away I go up the stairs, the oval end days up the stairs, the boardroom is now, and there was a wee room was the manager's office. So I've knocked on the door. "Come in, son." And I've opened the door, and the manager's sitting there, and his face was priceless. Like I'm the last person he expected. "Can I help you, son?" I said, "Yeah, gaffer, can I speak to you for a minute?" "Right, okay." So I sat down. I said, "Listen, I've seen the team up in the back of the change room door." And he went, "Yeah." I says, "Well, listen, I'll just cut to it. In my opinion, I'm the best goalkeeper at the club." He says, "Well, in my opinion, son, I'm a better manager than Alex Ferguson. That fucking phone hasn't rang up Man United offering me a job." And that was the end of it. And the minute he said that, you could just hear downstairs everyone banging the doors, banging the walls, cheering. And I knew, completely stitched up, hook, line and sinker. And down the stairs, and a couple of weeks later I got called in, and the conversation was different. It was good. I probably thought it was the end of the world. And it was, "Listen, you've done really well. Your progression's there. You're not ready for the first team. You need to get bigger. You need to get stronger. You need to go and play in games, and we're sending you to the Welders." I didn't know who the Welders were.
Yeah.
Right? They're literally now, times have changed now, and there's a family connection which we'll get to, but they were 2 minutes up the road from me.
Literally.
What I didn't know was my dad had played for them and captained them. His dad had played for them and captained them. So everybody there knew who I was, but I didn't even know they existed.
But see, if you think about that, all you've revolved your life around is Glentoran.
Yeah.
So it's really a bubble there. You don't want to look outside. You don't feel like you need to.
Yeah, I never even looked at. I didn't even know amateur league football existed. It was just going to training, going and watching the Glens, going to training, going playing, and it was just Glentoran 24/7. So I went anyway, and a guy called Brian Lilly met me. He was a complete gentleman. He was a chairman. He says, "We'll look after you here." And I was 18, walking in the doors at Tilliesburn, new old pitch, which was horrendous.
Yeah.
Pokey changing rooms, and then walking into a changing room of just absolute legends: Philip Major, Philip Nell, Michael Surgeon, Tom Cleland, Raymond Morrison, who was one of the Glentoran players I idolised, Gary Hillis, Geordie Neal. It was a club for aging players and players on the decline, but total winners. And from the minute I walked in there, it was a complete different feeling. You were now in it. Okay, it was a first division club or a B division club in those days, and you were amongst it, but you almost felt like a footballer and what they had done and achieved, and they took me under their wing, and that was the making of me. The first game I played was definitely not the making of me, or maybe it was. The cup started before the league. I think we had a period out of CIS cups and different things, but we got Dundela in the cup. First game I played for the club, and I had an absolute nightmare. we were beat. I can't even remember, 4 or 5 biggest rivals. I get nutmegged in the edge of box, come out for one. Somebody slid it through my legs and poked it in, dropped the cross. Just had an absolute beast. And the next week, so back in the end days, you had a big bus. The committee and the board used to travel on the bus. So all the senior pros were up the back playing cards. All the committee were down the front smoking. Right. And that's how it was. And there's me sitting in the middle with a pair of headphones on, just sitting there like a wee boy. And you used to get your wages in a brown envelope and your expenses and whatever else you were owed. And a guy called Bimbo Wilson, who was on the committee, taps me in the shoulder and says, "There you go, son." Gives me my brown envelope. I was like, "Thank you," and put it in. He says, "Open it." This is on the way to a game, by the way, the next week. I says, "No, I'm okay. I'll keep it. Open it." So I was like, "Okay." Opened this wee, peel this wee.
Reluctant, like you're like,
oh. Opened it up. It was a Joker playing card, and he absolutely battered me. Oh, worst goalkeeper this club's ever had. Your dad be ashamed of, and your granddad be ashamed of, and Dundela last week, and gone.
Yeah.
And again, was it the making of me? Probably. Like, we got to the end of the season, we'd won the League Cup, Smirnoff Cup. We finished second in the league. Dundela just pipped us. They were a good side back then. They were winning everything. And I got called into the junior international setup to play Holland, Portugal, and Malta in Holland. Player of the year, Players Player of the Year, Club Player of the Year. So what an unbelievable season. And I'd love to say that when I got my trophies, I had a Joker playing card in my pocket to hand them back. But I didn't.
You weren't that novel yet.
Probably now I would have done it.
You'd have had something blown up. XL size.
The person for you probably would have done me in as well. But but no, those I think those times make or break you. And I don't think young players nowadays could handle that.
No, well, sorry to jump in there. I agree. I think that ultimately loan spells back then were a lot different than I think that they are now, because you're not able to go and get those caliber of players.
Yep.
Those old school sort of men that'll help you. Once you go on loan now, you're going to like an intermediate, not to be crude here, but an intermediate team or a struggling championship team.
Yep.
And you're not going into a team that's winning. You're going into a team that pretty much lose most weeks. Or yes, you're getting game time, but how effective can you be in those games whenever you're getting beat? You know what I mean?
100%. And again, that was just a team full of winners. And again, they're a wee bit slower. But they still had it up top, and they still had that inside that they wanted to win every week. And there was no cutting corners, there was no hiding places. You didn't take it easy on you as a young kid. If you needed called out, you got called out. But at the same time, you got an arm around you at times. You got told how good you've been. And it was a real good culture about the place. And again, I started to learn more about my family and people involved, and I think it just set the seed for what was to come later in life when I ended up going back there. And it's been the best period of my career over 3 spells, in terms of not best period of my career, but the happiest.
Right.
And it was successful, and I think I've won 5 or 6 trophies there with that club. And you can always say, yeah, but you dropped down a level and it wasn't the Premier League, which is true. But sometimes happiness comes first, and if you can get that with adding trophies to it, it's a bonus. And I think it's worth more than money.
When you make that move over there, you're told initially that you're 18, you're not good enough. You're going to go play regular football, and then you walk into that changing room with those legends. How do you feel? Like, are you nervous? Are you like, oh, I don't want to make a mistake? Does it play on you?
No, weirdly, I've never ever been nervous for a game. I've never been nervous walking into a building. You know, I don't know why. I can't explain it. I just never felt that, and never felt anxious about anything involved in football. So I suppose I'm quite fortunate in that respect. But again, I probably looked up to a lot of them and watched them week after week after week for years. So kind of felt like I knew them.
Right, okay.
And I say, when I walked in and they knew me because of my dad and his dad and the history with the club, I almost felt like I'd been there for a while, and we all knew each other, and loads of wee funny things. We used to have biscuit club, and everyone used to take turn bringing biscuits, and we used to get raided, and obviously music was a big thing, and when we done it, and different person on the music, but I used to sit after training and have a cup of tea and biscuits together, and you're sitting there with people like listening to their stories and winning Irish Cups and winning leagues and thinking, you didn't realise then it was helping you, but it was. And I suppose from a mentality point of view, and I want to win and professionalism, I know that was a level down, it was an aging squad and thing, but it helped me massively. So probably the biggest turning point was in the second. I ended up staying for the 2 years because I just thought I was going there and going back to Glentoran as a number one. I still felt that.
Yeah.
But we got Crusaders in the Irish Cup. We played them 0 each. I got man of the match. Can't really remember too much about the game. Obviously, I must have been busy, but again, Crews were a decent side then. And then went to a replay. They beat us 1-0 in the replay. It was a penalty. Gavin Arthur scored it. And again, I got man of the match in the replay. And I remember going back. I was in my mum's house, and where I lived, and somebody knocked on the door. We didn't even have a house phone, do you know what I mean? It was like, that was, that's just the way it was. And somebody knocked on the door. Mum said, Michael, there's somebody at the door for you. And I opened the door, and Alan Dornan's there, Crusaders manager.
Right.
I was like, right.
Hi, Al.
Come in. I literally just didn't expect it, and come in. I said, listen, I thought you were unbelievable with the 2 games. His brother, Alan Dornan, was at, Reggie was at Dundela. I think Alan was there as a player and played for the Welders and Dundela. So he said, we've been keeping an eye on you, not just over these 2 games. And I want to sign you, and I want to put you straight in the first team. And suddenly that changed. There was never that was never there from Glentoran.
Yeah.
But now Crusaders, a Premier League club and a big club, were saying we're going to put you straight in. And I think they had 3 or 4 goalkeepers there at the time. So that was like 2002. And again, going into a really experienced changing room. They didn't have much, I mean, the kids were desperate. ACS, Gavin Arthur was, I think he'd made a fortune out of it as a rep. But they were horrendous. Wesley Lamont was there as a goalkeeping coach.
What a name.
And Roy McDonald was there too. Big Mac was there. But again, just that very similar to the Welders, going into a club, very homely, very family orientated. Looked after from minute one, and we went on an unbelievable run. I think having nothing, and Dorney was brilliant at that. It was, they're laughing at you, knowing the warm-ups. Linfield and Glentoran, all the best of gear and new footballs, and we were like gypsies, and we can say that that's the way we were, hand-me-downs and Ragharsh Rovers. So we thrived on that, and for the first quarter of the season, I think we were top of league one stage. We were unbeaten through the CS Cup semi-finals and right through, and I had a brilliant time there. And then it started to change. We started to lose games. I can't remember having too many bad games. Well, it probably sounds big-headed. I generally can't remember, but just things just started to turn a little bit, and I think Alan maybe felt the pressure a little bit. Probably they were expecting miracles. With no budget, we were starting to lose games. What else could we do? And nothing was working. Everything he tried, nothing was working. And ultimately, the players, it was their fault and our fault and my fault. And you wouldn't think it now, I had long hair and behind the ears. And I remember we played
non-existent now.
Oh God, we played Ballymena one night. At Seaview, wind comes straight across the pitch. Like you were having to kick a ball that way for the land over here.
Oh, I thought you were going to say your wig and your blew off.
No, wig was decent, so that's the story. So I had the wee hairband and all on and everything there, and giving it everything. And we lost the game 1-0. And Dorney comes in halftime, goes absolutely ballistic, and starts on everyone. And I think Justin McBride scored for Ballymena. Livy's one of my closest mates and somebody I really look up to, but it was Livy's fault for the goal.
Okay.
Still don't put in for this.
No, that's fine.
So Donny started on everyone. He gets to me and he says, "You Spice Boy, get your hair out of your eyes, get a cut." I'm thinking, what am I got to do with this? Right? I have no part in this goal. So I was like, right, okay. So I right, okay, get showered, get changed, go home. And a day later we're in town, me and my mate, and we walking past the inn shops, and there was the wee Afro-Caribbean hairdressers used to be there. I thought, you know, we good here, we'll go in here. So I go in, and I think I was there for 6 hours, and 300 quid later, we had the clip-on extensions to start it off in the wee bits, and with the cornrows in, and with it right back. Honest to God, what was I doing? But this was all for a laugh. Like, you're spending stupid money that you didn't have just to try and do something for a laugh. And I walked in, obviously the boys are busting their chops, laughing, right, killing themselves, and nothing from Dorney, just absolute ice.
Just blank.
Yep. And from that point to the end of the season was the same. I never get spoken to. I just got completely blanked over and over and over. And at the end of the season, I remember it like it was yesterday, Player of the Year due. I got called up by Roy Bennett, and he said, sign that. It was a new contract. I was like, Dorney, you haven't spoken to me in like 6 months. And he says, well, you tried to make an arse out of me. And I said, I actually didn't, but I can see how I came across that way. But the other side is like, you haven't spoken to me. And he says, listen, you're a young goalkeeper. We were under pressure. I was under pressure. And you needed to be taken out of the team. And that was right. I said, that's what you should have said 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Nothing. So tumbleweeds, you know, every time you walked in, it wasn't good. And I said, listen, I need a couple of days to think about it. And they absolutely lit on me. And I have so much respect for Alan Dornan, and I've met him 100 times since. Yeah, brilliant man. And I don't know whether that job was good for him or not. Only he can tell you that. Brilliant to play for. He was an unbelievable player for Linfield as well. And just that period just wasn't a good time. And he absolutely lit on me, and he thought I had something lined up. And I left Crusaders. I says, I'm not signing it. And that's the reason I'm not signing it. And I walked out and no club. And literally thinking, what do you do now? Because no social media in those days. And it says, no agents and all this and what was happening. And literally it was back to Paul Kirk. And went to speak to him, and he says, I want to sign you. I want to bring you to Distillery. Right. And that was probably the start of a whole different chapter of going on a really good run, playing in a team, challenging, overachieving, but doing really good things.
See, whenever you talk about at the start there, Crusaders, you take off, you start the season really, really well. Fans have a weird thing where they seem to think that this run's going to continue.
Yeah. And
the wheels ultimately, most of the times, always fall off.
Yeah, and when you look at that squad, you Spearsy was in it, Big Livy was in it, Brian Russell, Gavin Arthur. You had some unbelievable pros there, and again, they're coming to the end. And I didn't really think I was a bar because I experienced at the Welders and seen how they got through, albeit at a different level. But then the rest of the team was all kids like me, Paul Dixon, Colin McGill, and you Davy McGowan starting to come through, and people like that, Coatsy.
Yeah.
Beaver, Steaky, and you're going like,
these players became who they became, but
top players,
they just weren't.
We just weren't ready for it. So probably the youth and enthusiasm, and I suppose that going back to my Glentoran, I am the best player here, carried us through so much.
Yeah,
but then it really kicked in. You get in that winter period of teams knowing how to win games, knowing how to grind you down and get the job done, and we just dominoed. Did stay up, did get through it, but it was a tough period.
When you talk about your contract there with Alan, and he comes to you and just wants you to sign that deal, do you think that that's just like an inexperienced thing as a manager, thinking you're a young, naive kid who's just going to do that and he's going to be content here? Or do you think that he ultimately knew that you were potentially going to go?
No, I genuinely think he wanted me to stay. And Crusaders was a brilliant place to be, even in no days, even when they didn't have much. It was a brilliant place to be, and I think if it probably wasn't all down to him. I'm saying if he hadn't managed the other thing better, it was my fault, you know. But I probably wasn't old or experienced enough to go and fix that. You know, now if you know you've done wrong as a player and there's a bit of friction there, you just go to the coach or the manager and sort it out. So I left it as well, and it was probably my own doing then when it got to that stage. But he did want me to stay. He wanted me to sign it. They brought Neil Armstrong in, who shored things up and was at Glentoran. I knew Neely and looked up to Neely. But ultimately, I still backed myself and wanted to play, and I thought I'd have no problem getting the club. So it was a regret because we talked about those players that then went on and earned cult status.
Yeah.
And Coatsy and Chris Morrow and people like that. And, you know, I don't have many regrets, but that's probably one of them, if I'm honest, by going, if I had stuck out with that group through the whole journey, and when he ended up went back to Crusaders, and Coatsy was still there, and everything that he'd been through and achieved throughout that,
Yeah.
I would have liked to have been part of that, but the decision was made, and I walked out, and I was on the lookout for a new club.
Distillery's next.
Yep.
Talk to me about Distillery.
Back with my own mate Kirker. Yeah, it was very plain and simple. I went to speak to him and asked him for his advice, and he says, I want to sign you. Philip Matthews was there, and well established and actually a fan favourite. And again, I didn't really think of that. I've never thought of that, going in and worried about who else was there. But it was so good. Again, a club that didn't have that much. There was a little bit of money there through Lagan Valley Steels and Tommy Anderson, who supported the team and the club. But a real togetherness in that group, and it was something special. Kirker had a massive part to play, the way he coached us, the way he managed us, the way he was with us off the pitch. I'd known him obviously all my life, and seen him as a father figure, a friend, and totally respected him. So what he got out of us was unbelievable. Like, to qualify for Europe with that Distillery team, the first in 30 years since Martin O'Neill's side done it, was ridiculous. Like, in theory, we should have been nowhere near it. And that was my first taste of European football. And playing with people like Darren Armour and, oh my God, like an absolute lunatic.
Yeah.
Absolute lunatic of the highest order. We were talking the other day about Alessandro Zarelli. Don't know if you remember the Italian kid. And I went to the airport with Kirker. So he shows me this CV, this winger. And he'd played at Rangers, he'd played at Sheffield Wednesday. I think Juventus was his other club, or Roma or AC Milan, one of the top clubs anyway. And he was signing for Distillery. Right, so I don't know how anyone didn't know that this was a strange one, right? It was a bit of a fishy one, but I went to the airport with Kirker, and in my head I'm expecting this big Italian god to walk out of the international airport arrivals, and the E-man comes walking down with a rucksack and everything else. I was like, wow, what's happening here? And the story's brilliant. He actually passed away quite a few years ago, but he turned his life around, but he was a con man. Right. So he was his own agent, right? He was typing up CVs. Right? He's unbelievable. Right? He was phoning people from a payphone in a shop underneath the apartment where he lived with his mum, and being a different person, putting on a different voice. And the Distillery fell for it, and there was a Sky documentary. A lot of clubs fell for it in Wales and England, stuff like this. But he wasn't earning money. He was getting digs and he was getting expenses, and I think he was living with the Distillery's secretary. He racked up an unbelievable phone bill. He was phoning.
Did I get this next club?
No, he was phoning chat up lines. He was the back of the newspaper, and he was phoning, and the boy got it, and it was like through the roof.
Yeah.
So that was one of them. But I remember his first night of training, and the ball came to him. Armour absolutely put him on the greyhound track. It was a joke. It was ridiculous, and he was rolling about. There was sand in his face and this, and then everyone couldn't believe it. And Armour was like, "See what he's made of now." Yeah. Just like picked him up on the go. He never ever kicked the ball for us.
That's so.
Remember away to Oma on this Saturday in the league, and we went there and won. And for some reason, I don't know this why, Kirk had arranged it friendly away to Finn Harps on the Sunday. So we'd done that journey to Oma and back on the Saturday, a few beers in the bus, and then
to Donegal.
And then we're going the next day to Donegal, and I'd come off at this stage, and Alessandro was on the bench along with a few of the young lads, and Kirker says, "Get warmed up, you're coming on," right? And I remember he ran out of the dugout and ran out of the pitch. He had no boots on. He forgot to put his boots on. He was so excited, right? So he's run up and thing, and I'm going, "My God, what are we doing?" So he literally brought him on and brought him back off again.
Oh, he went sub him off again.
I subbed him off.
Double subs.
He was horrific. He was horrific. He was crying on the bus on the way home and everything else, and it was unbelievable. But that team and that period of time and those couple of years was really, really good. Like, actually, I think the Distillery have massively declined since Paul left the club.
I was about to say, they're not to jump in, but Distillery, even whenever I grew up, I didn't really take an interest in the league until I started getting into it. And Distillery was always in and around.
Yep.
Like, it was a big club. The dog track always had a big thing about it. And the Saturday night, then there was always the food, the dogs running. And you always thought to yourself, geez, Distillery's a big, big club. And it's just went completely downhill.
Yeah, and they weren't paying much money. And I can't wait for Rory Hamill to come out again and say, never let a lie get in the way of a good story, because it's one of my favourite stories of all time. And Rory being Rory tells people it's made up.
Right.
So whether it's made up or not, it's funny.
Right. Okay.
So Rory Hamill left the Glens, and he was, I think he left the Glens, but he was going around a few clubs. And again, Rory being Rory, wanted as much money as he could get. I remember Kirk saying, I'm meeting somebody, give us a few minutes. I used to travel in the car room. We lived a couple of streets away from each other. And Darren Armour lived in the next street, so we had to pick Darren up as well.
It's a good car school, that.
Yeah, it was good. And I remember, so the pay bracket was like 75 first year, 100 second year, and 125 third year. And you got your other bits and pieces. And Rory was a top player, like he'd come back from England. And I remember Kirker saying, listen, Tommy's going to sort you out and there'll be a signing on fee. He says, but there's a pay structure. And he says, this is the pay structure, 75 and 100 and 125. He says, well, straight away, we'll give you 125. And Rory says, 125, man? What do I want by a motorbike? And gets up, walks out and closes the door. Out in the door swinging. And Kirker's looking at like this here. And I love Rory coming to me and saying, that never happened yet. I'm going to tell everyone it never happened. It's just made up. But it was, honestly, one of the best stories ever. 125, what do I want to be a motorbike? And I went in and I went on to play with Rory at the Glens, but I went back and what a character. Like, an unbelievable guy. Mad guy, but a brilliant player as well. But that period of Distillery was really good for me. On the pitch, off the pitch. Paul came and spoke at my wedding, and just so many good memories about it.
Talk to me about getting into Europe with Distillery. Like, that's the first time you touched on there that the club's done that in 30 years.
Yeah.
It's not a huge, big money pair. It's not like it's attracting these massive people and dishing out all this money to get them in. So for that club to do that's an unbelievable achievement. But what was that buzz like for you at that time getting into Europe?
It was weird because I can't remember celebrating it. You know, now like you see teams celebrating getting into European spots and stuff. Maybe we did. I can't remember. Like, maybe we did at the end of season 2. But the team was like Paul Muir, Wayne Buchanan, centre backs, Michael Ferguson, and Gareth McKeown as your fullbacks. Fran Murphy was on another level.
Yeah.
Although he didn't go to Europe, he was Dennis Bergkamp, the Irish League, wouldn't fly. You had Armour up front. You had Bo Willis. Jared Little came back from Celtic, and he had played there. It was a serious team. And again, everyone there, not for money. And Paul somehow managed to convince everyone to come and sign for Distillery. And the experience of going was was brilliant and horrendous at the same time. We got a team in Lithuania. And I remember travelling to Dublin first, and then the flight to Lithuania, and then another coach journey in club suits.
Oh,
like we had club suits. We used to have club suits for home games and track suits for away games. And it was the old bus conductor suit of the navy jacket and the grey Farah trousers. His sky blue shirt and his club tie, horrendous. Right, the big Distillery badge here. And I remember it was the warmest journey alive, and everyone was sweltered, but that was Kirker's rule. And we got on a bus that was like the Millennium Falcon. It was horrendous. The seats were missing. There was wires sticking up and coils and springs. And going, what's going on here? But it was an experience. We were a day early than normally. And normally you go a day before the game and you train and then you play and you have a night out, which is part of it, and you go back the day after. For some reason, it must have been the way flights worked. We were there an extra day early. I remember being at training. Reggie Hillam was a goalkeeping coach who, hands down, was the best I've ever worked with. Okay. What a guy Reggie is. He's still coaching at Glentoran. And we were on the training pitch, and I remember seeing Tommy Anderson in the chair or the board and stuff, speaking to these other people in suits. So Paul comes and says, listen, we were meant to play on the Friday. I said, listen, they want to move the game back to the Saturday. We were flying back to Saturday night. The club they're actually going to put it on TV. The club are going to get a few quid for it. So we're going to make the decision. He said, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you all have a few beers tonight. So it was the first night. He says, we'll have a pub quiz. And, right, okay, brilliant. So he says, 2 beers, that's it. We'll have a bit of a quiz.
Never happens, does it?
It wasn't 2 beers. Armour was on another level. Armour and Gareth McKeown, honestly. And so we're there, and the quiz is going on, and I used to keep seeing this curtain moving, and I'm looking over and Armour at about 8 pints behind the curtain. Right, so he's there, and Gareth McKeown's there, and there's somebody on the other side just bringing them down, right, and setting the pints there. So they're bringing them around, and obviously, you're not drinking tonight, Darren? No, I'm only having 2 pints, like that. Down, empty, new one in. I was rooming with Paul Muir. The hotel we were in, you had to go down like a wee tunnel to get into it. It's a gorgeous hotel. So we're in bed anyway, so me and Paul are on the bed, and I can just hear this noise from downstairs, and I hear, gee, cover me, I'm going in. And I'm looking out, right, and Armour and Gareth McKeown are pretending to be like commandos. They're commando rolling, and they're covering each other, right, and go, right, completely steaming, right, and they get to the end. We're watching the whole way down, absolutely like busting our chops at them, and the noise echoing around the tunnel, and they get out, then they disappear up the street. So they're on a night out, and then one of the greatest stories ever. So the next morning, when we're down for breakfast, and there's no Armour. Right, and Mark Clegg went on the trip. One of the kids, and Gary Spence, because Fran Murphy wouldn't travel and somebody got hurt. Brilliant experience for those two. And Cleggy was put in the room with Armour. I think he was 16. Kirk was like, "Where's DA?" He's like, "He's sleeping. I don't think he feels well. Go and get him." All right, go and get him. Where's G? Where's Gareth McKeown? Somebody to go and get him. So the two of them come down with in their socks. So it's just going night. So obviously the whole thing went on. Kirk wasn't happy to get fined, everything else. So the story is, they'd made their way up the bars, and then they got to this nightclub, and they wouldn't let them in because they had trainers on. Because you only travelled in, right? They had their trainers. They weren't. So now you're not getting in, and there didn't seem to be any men in Lithuania. I think they were all national service. Remember that? And apart from the bouncers that were 6'7", so they weren't letting them in. And Armour being Armour, wanted the scrap, and Gareth McKeown, where he pulled this from, I'll never know. He's not the brightest, but sees a bowling alley across the road, says, all right, we'll go and change our shoes and be back in a minute. Go and book a lane of bowling, put their trainers in, get the bowling shoes, and come back to the nightclub with the red, white and silver bowling shoes on, right? And goes, what about then? Your man goes, go ahead. Obviously when they come out of a nightclub, the bowling alley's closed. Right, so rather than come down the next morning bowling shoes, which is all they had, they come down their socks and got scooped. And Armour got put in the transfer list because it. I think he took off pretty quick. But I think we drew the game. I'm pretty sure we drew the game and got beat at home. But again, Tommy looked after us like with a horrendous journey on the way back. But it was cases of beer, on the drinks on the flight. And we got to Dublin, carry out on the way up the road. Just a real good feel about that group and that club. On the way back, I remember somebody threw, I think it was Armour, threw a shoe on the bus, just took us randomly through a shoe and it hit somebody in the back of the head. It might have been Tommy Anderson actually. It gets up and who threw it? And nothing. He says, who threw it? I'm going to ask one more time. He says, it was me. He says, do you know what? You are on the transfer list. He says, no, it wasn't me. That was it, like as if that was just gonna take it away. So brilliant group. Probably should have achieved more. I know after Paul left it declined a wee bit. Tommy Wright took the reins. We won in the League Cup maybe. So. But where they are now is a disaster. It was a brilliant club. But I shouldn't have left. Talk about not leaving Crusaders. Don't know whether it was a 2-year itch or what it was. When I look back, but I didn't want to leave the Distillery, and probably because of how successful we were. Teams were coming in for me, and Paul obviously was telling me about them, and I think any other manager doesn't tell you and wants to keep you. But I think our personal relationship, or maybe it wasn't, maybe he just wanted a few quid for the club, and Philip Matthews was there. He was going to go in and play. But he told me to Portadown to come in for me. I wasn't interested. He told me again to come in for me. And basically talked me into going and meeting Ronnie. I think they got a player plus money for me when it came around, but bad move for me.
From talking to you there about your time at the Distillery, and then you speak about how you didn't want to go and the reasons behind going. Do you wish now, looking back on it, that you just held your ground and thought, I'm more than happy here. The grass isn't always greener. I know it's hard to say this because you're a wee bit older, but at the time, sometimes you think more money, go and play, could be better.
Yep.
And you just ever think that should have just held fast?
Oh, I do. 100% should have stayed. Like, we all had jobs. Nobody was full time. I actually had a sponsorship with Diodora, and then they gave me a job as well. I was actually getting decent money at that point in time.
You like a rep?
Yeah, and looking after all the clubs in Ireland and stuff like that, and doing boot deals and stuff. So, the Distillery money was never a thing. It was never about money with any of us, I think, when we played. I can honestly say it wasn't for me. But Portadown were massive payers, and everybody knew that. And when I spoke to Paul, I said, listen, I don't want to go. I'm happy here, and we're achieving things. And he said, Michael, like, Portadown are a top club. So Glentoran, Linfield and Portadown, them as the top three. And you're going to be challenging for leagues. We're not, and it almost convinced me to go and speak to him, speak to Ronnie, and when I went and spoke to him, Ronnie was brilliant. Like, I love Ronnie McFall and so much respect for him. And even speaking to him and hearing all the good things, in the back of my mind, I knew it was the wrong move. I just knew it. And things at home, my wife was pregnant and she wasn't having a great pregnancy, and the travelling and stuff. And then you go down there and it's a summer. You're making the journey down to speak to him in the summer, and the weather's good and it's not as much traffic, and you're thinking, it's actually not too bad. And I just knew from the minute I walked in, and it's nothing about the club. I couldn't say anything bad about the club itself. It's just a wrong move for me. It just didn't fit in, and ultimately I had an absolute disaster. Like, I'm sure if you ask some Portadown fans who the worst goalkeeper in history was, I think I'd be in with a shout, honestly. And do you know what? I'd probably vote myself out as well, because I actually had a really good start and played again, qualified for Europe, and we played in Europe. They qualified from the year before and went back and played there and done really well. And the start of the season, actually, over pre-season stuff, and probably I think it was maybe 9-10 games in, just started to grind on me. It's not a massive journey. Like, I travel more now, but it just wasn't for me. And game was that.
But then again, if you're traveling now, it's because you want to travel. You're doing that because you enjoy coaching. Yeah. Whereas if you had to travel to Portadown, say, and you were getting the same buzz out of what you were getting at Distillery, that wouldn't have bothered you.
No, it's true. I remember when I spoke to Ronnie about the contract, and he, like, again, I was on 250 at Distillery, like peanuts in the grants, but in the end it was still decent money, like in 2005 this is. So it wasn't the worst money, but he offered me something. I remember saying to him, physios get more than that. His physio was from East Belfast, and I used to go to him. He wasn't even a proper physio, right? And he was getting more than that, and I says, nah. And I remember leaving, and he phoned me, and I came back. Right, what do you want? I want that. No, I'm not giving it. Right, see you later. And I was being firm then, and it was then about, right, let's get a few quid. And it was wrong. It was there for the wrong reasons. And in the back of my mind, I always knew that. I remember the old kit man, Geordie, was an absolute legend. Been there for years, like his whole life at the club. And he showed me and he says, oh, we're professional and all your training kit's here. Like, we never had it. You used to wash your own kit in days and bring it. And you leave your boots, and your boots are cleaned, all your stuff, and your gloves and your shin guards. And the best ever thing about the shin guards was my great granny used to buy me something every year, Christmas, something to do with Glentoran. Right? Because our husband, my granddad Bobby, used to take me to games. And God love her, she was like probably on her way out at this stage, right? And I remember opening these shin guards on Christmas Day, and there were Sondigo ones, and there were Paul McStay Celtic ones. Right? Because they were green. They were green and black, right? And the Paul McStay and the signature and all on them. And I wore them. I was only a kid, and I wore them the whole way through at school.
Yeah.
At Glentoran Academy, at the Welders, everywhere. They were my shin guards. And by the time I get to Portadown, they're obviously ripped and they're taped together and everything, but they meant something to me. He lost them after a week. Now, he said he lost them, but I'm pretty sure if someone's got into Portadown with Paul McStay shin guards, they're being thrown in the bin.
Nope.
Yep, see ya. So I was raising about that.
I'm sure you were.
But that was one of the things. It was like, it's just another reason why it wasn't for me. And again, the disaster I had was, I was sent off twice in 2 weeks. One on, like again, if it happens today, I'm finished.
Right.
The ball boy, banging into a ball boy. The ball boy collision at Ballymena. Which is funny, and I've spoken to the kid. He's grown up now. He's a good lad, right? And every time something happens in football involving the ball boy, he'll tweet me, and we'll have a bit back and forward. But I've been sent off. I think it was against Crusaders, which wasn't a sending off. Davy Larmer stitched me up and dove. Normal one match ban back in the team. So we're away to Ballymena. And we're well in the game, nil each. We're controlling the game, and it's a wet night, windy night, usual at Ballymena.
Yeah.
And I'm playing in the. So obviously, if you're coming out of the tunnel, I'm playing in this side, in this goal. So the ball goes through and goes out of play, but it was flagged for offside.
Okay.
Now the whole game up to this, the ball boys are getting the balls back like this, right? They're like ball launchers, right? And once Ballymena go 1-0 up, I think Lee Patrick scored the goal. Go 1-0 up, there's no balls anymore, right? And people are hiding behind advertising boards and stuff like this, right? So the Joe Hart one where he's kicking the advertising, it was something like that. So as I'm running off the pitch, I can see the ball boy's got the ball in his hands, and I'm screaming, give me the ball, throw it. So I'm getting closer and closer and closer. He's like this, right? And honestly, and I'm come down, obviously, it's where the pitch was raised, right, and come off and onto the gravel and skidded right across the gravel. And as I get the ball, wallop right into him, right? And he's like skimmed, right? It's like a skimmer across the water. And he's like went 3. So I'm going, all right, get him back up. And literally doesn't down, ball onto the pitch. And then it's chaos, right? Obviously all the Ballymena fans are around. Davy Best was the referee. It's complete one of those where you're sprinting off the pitch, you're going to run into somebody and pick them up. And that's me, you're getting picked up and you just get on with it. But it was just chaos. And so Davey comes over and he's going, Michael, I'm going to have to send you off for hitting the ball boy. So he said he's seen it. The lino said they've seen it. Neither of them seen it. So I get sent off a straight red. And obviously I've got to walk right across towards the tunnel. And as I'm getting closer and closer to the tunnel, I can see more and more Ballymena fans making their way down towards the tunnel.
Just stand over the side of it.
Coming round and maybe I'm thinking this is not a good place for me to be here. And as I get closer and closer, I'm thinking, there's a female steward, get close to her. Right. Is her name Jackie?
Yeah.
Right.
It would have been Jackie, yeah.
So it was Jackie's son that I hit.
Okay.
Was the ball boy, which I didn't know, right? And I've had chats to her over the years since. So in my head, get close to her, nobody's going to hit a woman. And I think on the way up a tunnel, I get hit with a golf umbrella by Jackie on the way up. Scalper at the arse on the way up. And to be fair, Paul Muir went and spoke to him, who had known from the Distillery days. We played with Paul. He was close to them and everything else. I think word got back that it was one of them and that wasn't me and stuff. Deodora intervened, brought them up. We met them at Podium for Sport on the Montgomery Road. Brought them upstairs. Theodore sent them loads of gear. He was mascot for the Northern Ireland game and everything else. So it was all sorted out, but it could have went the other way. Again, something that was just so accidental and random. But it's funny now. I remember the Eden Hazard one came up. And he kicked the ball by, he landed on the ball, and there's been a few others. Joe Hart, so I always get to be remembered.
There's one at Cliftonville recently too.
Yeah, every now and again. I didn't get one actually on that, so I must not be popular. Hopefully this gets me back in the ball boy circuit again. Hopefully
we'll get that video circulating and get you viral.
But no, great lad. He tweeted me a few years later and stuff, and we had a laugh about it. And so it's good that people can laugh about things like that now, because I remember the next day being in, I'm pretty sure it was a B&Q. and I had a meeting to go to with Theodora, and it was in a hardware shop, and Radio Talkback was on, David Dunseith. I'm just waiting in the queue to pay for something, and I can hear, and now we're going to talk about the Irish League goalkeeper that's assaulting a ball boy. And this sweats running down my head. I'm going out out the door. So it was a big thing for a week or two, like.
It would be.
But again, no social media, and
well, thankfully, do you know what I mean? Or you would have had those little 10-second clips of you annihilating the ball boy all over the place.
Yeah, but when I went back to it again, you talk about VAR and things like that, are they good? And like there was none of that, obviously. The referee's report, they'd seen it. The referee had seen it. Both linesmen had seen it in the report. And BBC or UTV or whoever had it, who filmed the game for the highlights, showed that neither of the three of them had seen it. So the far lino had went to the halfway line to do a sub. Ballymena were doing a sub. So he's doing that. The linesman on this side was looking across the line. Hadn't even seen me running off to get the ball. He's worrying about the offside there. And Davy Best walking that way up the pitch to get into position. So they'd looked after each other.
Yeah.
And again,
smart though to be fair, but at the same time, like you probably shouldn't punch.
Nobody said punch
or whatever.
Nobody said punch or
grab one.
Accident.
If you didn't do it,
accident.
Probably no point in you doing it.
Skid.
You wouldn't have.
I think it was on a skateboard. I think that's what happened. I think it Heelys on my boots.
Hey, skid up.
I think it Heelys on or roller boots or something. That's what. No, again, totally accidental. Honestly, I can say that, but just a mad thing to happen. You never think it's going to happen to you until it does. I'm pretty sure if that happens now, you're done. Like, so that was it. It Portadown for me, and they went and signed Kevin Pressman. I went to Ronnie. I got back. I had to go back in the team after my suspension, but he was only a young lad. Can't remember his name. David Wright, maybe. And then a couple of games later, I just going back to what we talked about, it just wasn't for me. There was nothing to do with the sends off. I went to Ronnie and spoke to him and I said, listen, Ronnie, I've made the wrong decision, and rather than me just sit here and take my money, I'm going to take a break. I want to just step away from football, which I'd never thought in a million years would those words come out of my mouth. And to be fair to him, he was brilliant with me, and he said, listen, let me get a goalkeeper in. We might need you to play next week. Let me get a goalkeeper in if we can't get him before then. But we're going to give you X amount there. And they paid me, I think it was in October, and they paid me right up to Christmas. Right. Which they didn't have to do because it was me going. So classy from them. And they went and signed Kevin Pressman, who was like 40 years of age and 40 stone, and probably one of the best goalkeepers the Irish League's ever seen. He was unbelievable. He played for Sheffield Wednesday in the Premier League. He was ridiculous.
No wonder they paid you up. They were happy to get you out. He was like, "Oh, you want to leave? Here, pack your bags. There's your door boots. Get in."
Yeah. So no, brilliant, and he was unreal for them. But that period of a couple of months leading up to my son being born and stuff, I needed to be at home. I think really deep down in the back of my head, that's why I made that decision, and that's why I wasn't enjoying football, and probably why I didn't give it more than what I gave it at Portadown.
How long did you step away for?
So Charlie was born on the 21st of December, and in my head I didn't know how long I was staying away for. Probably the next season. And I remember sitting with him in the hospital suite, and my phone goes, and it's Paul Miller, Glentoran manager.
Don't tell me you took a step away for 3 days.
No, I was 3. I left in October.
Oh right, okay. So
and this was December.
if he's been born, you're like, yeah, I'm going back.
So I had that those chats and going to leave the next season and everything else. So Paul Miller phoned me, and I said I need to take this call, and stepped out and took it. And he said, listen, I want to sign you. When the window opens, I was like, I actually said I'm not sure, which surprising considering how much I wanted to play for Glentoran. And he said, no, listen, we've got a goalkeeper here that we need to get out. It's not working out with him, and if we can get him out, will you sign for us? And I said, listen, let me come to train and speak to you. And I went to train, and I trained. Of course, in my head, there was never going to be any other outcome, and I was going back. The minute I said I was going to training, that was it.
You knew pretty much. You were like, I'll just go, but I'm in.
Yeah, I was like a wee boy again. It was like the youth team days, and going back up. We trained at Ashfield at the time, and being back with Leaper and Nicky and all the boys that came through. was unbelievable. So we pretty much agreed it there and then that from January on I would sign. Agreed a wage with Tom Dick, who was the secretary at the time, secretary or chairman, and signed it. So that was me. I said I'll sign to the end of the season and just see how it goes, because Charlie was literally only born. So I think that was the first sort of lesson in things aren't always as they seem in football regarding finances and promises and whatever else. I was told a couple of weeks later that, you know, what we agreed we can't give you with no money.
At the Glens?
At the Glens at that point in time. Everyone was on good money.
Good money, bit of safe.
Yeah. I'd signed for buttons anyway. And I said, you know what, if I play for the first team, pay me it. Otherwise, I'll just be a number 2 to Elliot. I'll back him up. We'll get to the end of the season and we'll see where we are. Of course, they snatched my arm off for it.
Yeah.
I ended up then, I made my debut in the Setanta Cup, which was massive for me. And at the Brandywell, and we won 2-1.
Nice.
Paddy McCourt scored for them, opened it up. We had a weakened team. Probably why I was playing. But no, brilliant night. Brandywell was absolutely bouncing. It was phenomenal. The old grass pitch too. One of the best experiences I've ever had as a player. And then I played against Drogheda as well. And I think that was it before the end of the season. Didn't get paid for either of them.
Yeah.
But back to pre-season, Alan McDonald comes in as the new manager, and it called me and Elliot in and said, listen, I've got 2 number 1 goalkeepers. And Elliot, absolute legend, obviously everyone knows he is, and at that point in time he was halfway through that journey and had been an unbelievable number 1. I don't think anyone had kept him out of the team, and Alan said I have 2 number 1s, and whoever does the business in pre-season gets a jersey, which was like,
fair.
Yeah, Alan McDonald, absolute legend, telling you this, so you trust his word. And again, I said, well, I have no contract.
Yeah.
You've only one number 1 and you have a goalkeeper with no contract. He couldn't believe this. And straight away went and got me a deal and signed my contract. And then for the first time ever, I felt like a Glentoran player. I felt like, even though I'd already played those couple of games, I felt like I'd achieved what I always wanted to achieve, and signed a professional contract for my boyhood club.
How excited were you to actually put pen to paper at that stage?
Oh, listen, and I remember even not even knowing what they asked for. You know, and I knew what other players were getting, and I was like, I was just wanted to sign. Even though I'd signed that contract in the season, it was different because this was Alan coming in, telling you you're going to compete, telling you you have every chance of playing, and offering you a 2-year contract. And I don't think I asked for big money at the time. And I signed it and got that little bit of luck in pre-season that Elliot picked up an injury very early on in pre-season before we'd even played a game, actually. And I got to play every pre-season game, Man United game, Espanyol. I think Bolton came across and played us, if I'm right in saying. The European games away to AIK Stockholm. It's ridiculous opposition we had to play for. And then, again, start of the season, started off as a number 1 and continued that right through.
When you talk about that pre-season there, I don't think I've ever heard a pre-season like that in the Irish League. And you're saying United came, Espanyol, and then you go to Europe.
Yeah.
Like your build-up games are usually like Linfield behind closed doors, or get yourself ready at that level, because most people can't play. Do you know what I mean?
I think we conceded about 28 goals in that pre-season. But
your confidence isn't...
Well, the Espanyol game was brilliant because they were playing a tournament in England, and I don't know who'd convinced them to come across, masterstroke, and they've came across, and we were out, we'd done our warm-up, right, and then noticed that they're not out doing their warm-up. Somebody went and asked the question, their kit's still in Manchester. Right, okay, so we're ushered back in, and there was a big crowd there that day, as you would expect for Espanyol coming. And then we were saying, well, we'll change kit so you can wear our away kit, or you can wear our training kit. There was all sorts of things. I think even they were going to SS Moors to get a kit, and just a plain kit numbered in their thing, all this, and they were like, no, we're wearing our kit, TV rights and everything else. So that if you want to play us, you'll just have to wait. So
you're waiting there.
Yep,
you're waiting. 7 o'clock, kick-offs at 3.
I actually think
it was
2 hours or 2.5 hours. So the stuff was on the next flight. We already knew that was coming in the city airport. So we ended up doing an open day on the pitch. So we'd done a warm-up, we're now down. They let all the fans onto the pitch, like you do at the end of the season, right? And we're signing autographs and taking pictures and everything else. Back in, went out, done another warm-up, and then got beat 5-0. Which, to be fair, given the level of opposition, wasn't bad.
Yeah.
Zabaleta played in that game. Garcia, Raul Tamudo was, honestly, if you don't know who he is, anyone, Google him. He was an absolute joke.
Yeah.
He was like the real Raul, if you want to call him that. And was probably the reason why Raul Tamudo didn't get as many caps.
Yeah.
He scored a hat-trick. And I remember one coming across that he went to hit first time on the edge of that box and swiped at it and miskicked it. And all the Glens fans went, yay! And the boy just popped it to him and he whipped it like a hat into the top corner. And that was it.
His silence hits very quickly.
Oh, God. But again, just the experience of coming up against that level of opposition. And then the Man United game was huge.
Was it a full stack team as well?
Yeah, it was a full house at the Oval. Like, I mean, full house, right up the grass bank to the hill, completely sold out. It was live on Sky. We had done a thing. The guys had done the programme, used to just interview players at random times, and you got the double page. That was your profile, player profile, whatever. And Sam Robinson, who done it, I remember him, he came to my house. And it was all stuff about your family and different things. And we talked about a lot of things that we had talked about, wanting to play for Glentoran and all this. And mine just happened to then get picked to be the Man United game. So it was a bigger programme, big double page spread, again live on Sky, your family there. Their team was, I've got the jersey in the house along with mine, but Tom Heaton made his debut, who went on to have an unbelievable career. He's back at Man United last couple of years. Danny Simpson right back, Vidic and Ferdinand, Evra, that was their back four. And then you'd Carrick, O'Shea, Anderson, and then you'd Nani, Fraser Campbell and Lee Martin, I think that was their team.
It's insane.
So 3-0 they beat us, which wasn't bad. Again, Nani scores an absolute worldie.
About to say that's the famous Nani
That's
goal.
the one. What's it? I was the first goal for Man United as well.
Good.
I'm glad I'm on the end of that. Probably the first eyebrow raise that somebody doing 3 somersaults in front of you after they've top ended.
Pre-season.
I'm sure other players were clapping after, like, but it's funny because you're diving for it and you're thinking, I'm seeing this. I'm just, nah, not. That was an absolute rocket. Colin Nixon's fault for getting caught in the ball inside the box. So sure, but again, to be part of that, like, it was so special. The players were great after in this signed jersey and stuff like this. I didn't know who Tom Heaton was because it was his debut and he was young.
Yeah.
And I wore 18 at the Glens. And we had a jersey in the first half that went to sponsors that they paid for, and then had a jersey for the second half that we could keep or swap. My jersey in the second half had 1 on it for some reason. It had Dougherty 1 instead of Dougherty 18. So I was thinking, you know what, I'm just going to keep this. And Tom Heaton comes up after the game and we shook hands and he says, picks his jersey off and he says, you want to swap? And I said, no, I'm all right. Honest to God. And I didn't mean it in a bad way. And he was like, cheers, right, okay. And he was a wee bit fuming, and I was like, no, give me a minute. And I was trying to explain him and get my words out, and I couldn't do it. And away he went. And Derek McKinley, the old legend of a kit man, God bless him, went and got me one of last year's goalkeeping jerseys. So Tom thankfully swapped me that one. So I have mine and his in a big double frame, and the programme and all the pictures. So it's brilliant to have. And a few years later, when I went over to Burnley on a coaching visit, and I was like, I'm going to bring the jersey over because he never signed it. I didn't get him to sign it, but now that he was an England international and well-established goalkeeper, and it might be worth a few quid in a few years, I was like, I'll get him to sign this.
Anything else you've got?
So I got wired off that he was going to try and stitch me up,
right,
about it, and he was brilliant with me over the training and stuff. And remember being in the canteen, and he was like, obviously introduced me, and I played against Docker on my debut and blah blah blah. He's a great lad, and says, and funny story, he didn't want my jersey, he didn't want Tom's Heaton jersey, and I took it out of the bag and he said, you can have it back, you don't play for Man United anymore. And threw it back. But he was unbelievable as a goalkeeper. A brilliant guy, like, just a total legend. So good experience, really good start at the Glens, and just thought everything was going the way it should have been going.
Did it continue to go the way it should have been going?
No, it didn't. No, unfortunately for me. unfortunately for the club too. But no, probably the biggest thing, and people remember, is the Donegal Celtic Irish Cup game. And it's funny, everyone thinks that ended me at Glentoran. It did in a way, but it didn't at that time. We get Donegal Celtic at home in the Irish Cup. We're expected to beat Donegal Celtic. Rory Hamill, our old mate, who wasn't on his 125 that day, he did have his goal-scoring boots on. Yeah, so Rory had been loaned out to DC and been allowed to play against us. So I don't know how that happened or who messed that one up, but he played against us at the Oval. And again, even with Rory Hamill in their team, no disrespect to him, we were expected to win comfortably. The first goal, a back pass, I took a touch, no danger. Rory then decides to go and charge it down and jumps up and turns his back, and I've hit it off his big fat arse, and it's been in the top corner. Right? And it was the first big mistake I felt that I'd made.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure I'd made loads of mistakes, and I went on to make loads more, but it was the first one that really, really hit me. And I think, wow, what's happening here? And really affected me in the game. And we got back in the game. Gary Hamilton scored a free kick. And then late in the game, mad wind at the Oval, big kick from Stephen Kernduff. Bounces, I come right on the sort of the corner of my 18 to come and catch it or punch it. Leapers jumping to head it. Rory lets us two just get on with it, and it bounces over the two of us, and he cuts it in he literally cut it in with his left foot on the byline, and it kind of goes round and rolls in, and that was it. Game over. And it was just an absolute bomb scare of a day for me. I found out after that the DC goalkeeper, and brilliant of him, Stephen Kernduff, actually took me into our changing room. I was inconsolable, like tears on the pitch, head in my hands. There's a picture of me sitting just slumped on the pitch. Don't remember what happened. It's just a complete daze, but he got me back in the our changing room. And again, talking about, and we've now kind of rebuilt our relationship and stuff, but Davy McClellan was our goalkeeping coach, was my goalkeeping coach, and a really good guy. And I remember being in the changing room and Davy pat me in the back and saying, "Nothing I can do for you, big man." I was like, I just wanted to give me the ground to swallow me up, just give me something, and I let that affect our relationship. Like, we didn't have one after that. And looking back, it was again a bit like the Dorney thing, probably worse. That's your goalkeeping coach, that's who you're supposed to be closest with. Yeah. And not just you, but all the goalkeepers. But it hurt me, really, really hurt me. And the papers the next day, and I was still living in the area, grew up, and just feeling it every time I left the house. And ultimately, about 3 or 4 weeks later, Alan calls me in and offers me a new contract. Unbelievable. Like it did affect me for 3 or 4 weeks. See, I could feel it in training. Elliot was back in the team. I wasn't in the team. I was on the bench. But Alan, based on how I'd done right up to that point, and basically said that yes, my performance on the day wasn't good enough, and I contributed to the goals, but everything else outweighed that, and he wanted me at the club, and I signed a new deal. I gained on more money and better terms and everything else, and so things started to change again. It started to look better. And then at the end of the season, the following year, in pre-season, it changed massively, and that was probably the hardest point of my footballing career and part of my life as well.
So see, whenever that does happen and that relationship goes with Davy and you do sign a new contract, how does that relationship materialise over the next year?
It didn't, we hadn't fallen out, me and Davy, it wasn't like that, we weren't speaking to each other or anything. I probably just didn't feel I was getting what I needed. And years later, I contacted him, years later, we went to Park Avenue Hotel, and had a coffee and stuff, and he was like, I actually didn't know what to say. And that's all it was. Yeah. We'd never been in that position. And it's helped me as a coach now dealing with young goalkeepers, and I've made every mistake that a goalkeeper will make, which is good because you can pass that on too. But experiences like that, but at the time it felt personal.
Yeah.
And
he's just left you at this situation, and you needed somebody just to go, listen, it is what it is, you can't do nothing about it, pick your head up.
Yep. You wanted to hear something, and to get that, so that it wasn't the same, but it wasn't a personal thing, and it wasn't like we didn't talk, and I just didn't feel like I was getting what I needed and wanted. And again, that wasn't his fault. It was just the way it was. So nothing against Stevie. I have a lot of respect for him, and you know, we went on to have a good relationship again in later years. So but that period, it certainly didn't help me in that period when I was back in the team, and ultimately what came in pre-season kind of was the end.
Talk to me about that.
I'd got back in a couple of times, and again, you talked earlier about not feeling nervous. I probably told a wee bit of a fib on that one. There was a period in one game where I felt, though it wasn't nerves, but I felt it. I felt the pressure. You know, it wasn't nervous of I want to, I hope I play well and all this and blah blah blah. But I felt the pressure of, things aren't good here. And it was Glentoran against Cliftonville live on Sky on a Friday night, still going for the league, challenging Linfield, and Barry Johnson done his cruciate that game, I believe. Nicky had broke his ankle, or vice versa, two bad injuries, and then Elliot tore his groin.
Right.
So I've come off the bench. We're 1-0 up. It's crazy wind. Cliftonville have a corner, so I haven't touched the ball yet. The corner comes in, and I go to punch it. I punch the ball off Kieran Caldwell's head, and it goes straight in. And I follow through and obviously punched him in the head.
Yeah.
And Tull, the size of his head, like it's like an orange on a toothpick. No, brilliant lad as well.
Such a good guy,
what a player.
Hilarious too.
Yeah. So, and I felt it. I used to have my wrist taped up, my fingers taped, like most goalkeepers and stuff. And but I felt a real nervousness from the Glentoran crowd, and a real anxiousness, and it affected me. And every time the ball came back, you could really feel it be intense. And every time I touched the ball, there was something there. There was a pain, and didn't feel like it was anything major, but I just knew something wasn't right. We ended up, Michael Holiday scored like he always does. We won the game 2-1. We were still in the title race, and when I got into the changing room, Big Mac had said, listen, Michael, I need you to play maybe an hour for the seconds tomorrow. You haven't been in a few weeks, and I think we'd 2 games left in the league, 1 or 2. Which, no bother. I was taking the tape off, the wrist just collapsed. So I broke my wrist in 2 places. So I played on 35 minutes or whatever it was. We had broken wrist. We won the game. We're still in the hunt, but obviously I'm now in a cast. They got Chris Keenan in on emergency loan for the last game or 2.
The check?
Yeah, whatever it was. So that was it. And I didn't think anything of it. And obviously I was recovering. And then what followed was heartbreaking, to be honest, when I look back still, to be treated that way. And the resentment's gone. I did fall out of love with Glentoran for a long time over it, which is really hard considering what I've said. I've been a Glenman all my life. But it was back at pre-season, still wasn't fully fit. My cast was off, wasn't allowed to do full contact with my hand yet, had a little brace on, but I was allowed to do any running or fitness work. And I'd been away in the summer, and I'd been doing quite a bit, and I was fit. And we had our pre-season at Victoria Park, which is right at the top of my street. And I remember being on the pitch and just knocking the ball out with the boys before we start. And Big Mac had said, Michael, somebody wants to speak to you in the change room before we start. Okay, I didn't think anything of it. Went in, there was a girl there I'd never seen before, a woman, sorry, Moira Muldoon, I think her name was, and she was literally had a clipboard, glasses on the end of the nose, school principal look, and it was like, take a seat. Listen, we just want to advise you that your contract's been terminated and you can find a new club. Right, okay, I says. And to be fair, I'm proud of myself. I had a wee bit about me, and I was conscious of going, no, that's not how it is.
Yeah.
Because I don't know them, what I know now, and how football works, if you know what I mean. And I said, no, I'm a Glentoran player. I'll not be going anywhere. And she says, no, you can go. And it's almost that, don't worry about him, like he's a Glen man, and
yeah,
he'll go quietly, and
he's a fan there enough.
Yeah, he'll go
from there.
He loves the club and blah blah blah, like so many of us did. And I said, no, I've got to go to training. I just walked out of the room and went back over to the pitch. And I remember seeing Alan's face. Scott Young was there as his number 2, seeing their face, and they obviously knew what was happening.
Yeah,
it wasn't Alan's decision that I found out later, but I said, listen, I says I'm here to train I've got a report for training. I'm here to train. Whether you pick me or not, it's your decision. You're the manager and I respect it. He says, but I'll be at training. So it was obviously really embarrassing, as you can imagine, because I couldn't do any goalkeeping work. I was having to do the running. I was having to do the running by myself, 10, 15 yards away from the group.
Yeah.
And I was just trying to mirror what they were doing. And their little shuttle runs or doggies, whatever you want to call them. And it was soul destroying. But anyway, once they went into games, I couldn't do anything. And I was just pretty much running around the pitch by myself. The next night, came back in. And Alan had asked to speak to me. And I said, yeah, no problem, but I want a player there. And brought Lieber. He was a club captain and somebody I grew up with. And it was literally just to have somebody there, just to witness what was being said. And I said, listen, I know it's not your decision. You're probably stuck in the middle, but I'm a Glentoran player. I'm contracted. I want to do my best for this club, no matter how long it takes. And if you never pick me, that's your decision.
Yeah.
But I'm going to get in the team. And he says, Michael, I've been advised that if you turn up, I've got to send you home. And I said, is everyone happy to witness this? I've turned up. Yep. And I said, listen, just to let you know, I'm going to turn up every single night for training and matches because that's what I'm contracted to do. So a couple of days later, I get a letter. They put it in writing. We've terminated your contract due to underperformance. And when you look back at the games I'd lost, the one Setanta game in the very first period against Drogheda, the Irish Cup game, obviously. And I think there was another game in there, another Setanta game in the second year or third year, whatever it was, against Linfield. But I'd never lost a league game that I'd played in. I'd never actually lost a league game in the Oval my whole career playing for or against the Glens, which I'm really proud of.
Yeah.
But somebody somewhere just underperformance. They still had going back to that DC game. That was the end, and they'd had that in their head, and that was their reason for it. I think the reason was that plus finances, because they were starting to go on a downward spiral and they were paying people too much money, and I was one of them. Certainly I was getting far too much for the level of goalkeeper I was, and I don't mind admitting that. But yeah, so that was it. So you're told to stay away. You have no club. And I had to then go and seek legal representation, which wasn't a nice thing to do. But my position was, I've given a ring to this club. I've came through the youth team. I've been there as a supporter for 10 years before that, home and away. I came back and I played for free. I then signed on low wages. I then got a decent contract what I thought I deserved. And no sooner have I signed that and got in the team and done well, bar one game, you're taking it away from me.
Yeah.
And I have a young baby and I have a mortgage.
Yeah.
And that was the most important thing as well was...
Yeah, it's not just you anymore.
Yep.
The situation is you're not a kid, you're not an 18-year-old wee lad who just wants to turn up and play football.
Yep.
You've to provide for people. And this is one of the things that clubs, I think at times in the past, they don't care about. They don't care about people's mental health or how they're going to cope with just being told, crack on, mate, we don't want you here, and as if that's just a normal thing. It's not.
Yeah, and probably the mental health thing was always there. Of course, we know it's always been there. It wasn't talking about. No, it wasn't a thing, and I obviously really, really struggled with that. That was for me. That was total rejection from somebody that you loved. As in, I loved Glentoran, and you just been thrown out. Pretty much.
You also didn't give yourself the contract. You didn't write down a bit of paper. This is the amount of money I want, and this is how it's going to work. Somebody came to you and told you that this is what we value you at right now.
Yeah,
that amount of money mirrors what we expect you to be able to do or have done previous.
Yeah, I remember the contract negotiation. It was funny because Ryan Barry and Philip Simpson were two of the young lads, and it got brought in. We were all at the Park Avenue. We were all there outside the room, all the people they were offering new contracts to. You were called in and everyone was there, the board of directors and the manager, and everyone was coming out with smiles on their face. I was like, what's this?
Monopoly money was
like young kids, and they were on good money and stuff, and brilliant. And I remember going in and I was like, Michael, you've been unbelievable, and you established yourself as a number one, and obviously the Donegal Celtic game was what it was, blah blah blah. Probably see a real future here, and everything you wanted to hear.
Yeah.
And we believe there's not a number one. We've got you and Elliot, and it's both equally as good as each other. Whether anyone thought or believed that, I don't know, but that's what they were telling me. Yeah. And I remember saying, brilliant, pay me the same as Elliot. and their faces in the room were like, wow, okay. They kind of put herself in this place here. And I said, listen, make me an offer. And they wrote a number down and I signed it straight away. And
was it more or less than what you expected?
That was more, but it wasn't what other players were on. Other players were on telephone numbers, and for that period of time, again, I was probably on too much, as were other players.
We spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, and Gary was on, and Gary's podcast was incredible, but he speaks about the amount of money that he was getting at the Glens at that time, and it was like equivalent to what people are getting now, and that's with the influx of money that's in there. I know obviously certain people now are getting
it was the same time
and beyond, but
yeah, it was the same time. Gary played in that team. He scored in that game.
But he warranted it, actually. Like, I mean, Gary was
he was unbelievable, and he again, you pay the big money for the big players.
100%.
Gary Mohammed was one of those. I wasn't.
Yeah,
I had Elliot Marsh already. I went there as a number 2, got myself in ahead of him, stayed in, and we had a really good relationship and a good battle to who was in. And anytime Elliot was in, I wanted him to do well. Back to that goalkeeping union, and whether it was the other way about, I felt that it was. You would have to ask him, but we're still friends, and it was just a brilliant time. But that feeling of rejection, and ultimately what happens now. And I went to a lawyer, Larry McMahon, who played for Cliftonville and Lauren back in the day, centre half, absolute gentleman. And he was a FIFA agent as well, which weren't a thing back then. You know, he'd done that with his law degree. So he phoned the club or phoned their solicitors, and basically said, right, give me the reasons. What do we do? Let's get this lad on with his career. And they offered me 150 quid. All right. So it's I think it was a week and a half's wages or something. That was the offer. So Larry made it pretty clear, listen, this is going to take a bit of time to get this done.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? I explained also that if you're going to go somewhere, it has to be the right move. You have to get the right money, blah, blah, blah. Again, you've got responsibilities now.
Yeah.
So basically, that went on for a couple of months, and it was at the start of the season, pre-season, everything else, and I still hadn't anything sort. There was a few offers. But also, I still had that hanging over me of people remembering me for that game. I'd played the team after that. I got a new contract after that. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I was being sort of labelled with that, which I can see why, because it was a big, high-profile mistake. So they weren't the offers that I probably needed or wanted or found attractive. Maybe like the Portadown wasn't one of them, but they were similar to that, where I don't really want to go there. I'm not going to go there for that because it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So Larry said, listen, this could take anything up to a year to sort out, and it's up to you what you want to do. And Gavin Arthur, my old Crusaders teammate, had taken the PSNI job in the championship, and I remember phoning Gavin and saying, by the way, I'm coming to play for you. It's like, right, okay. He was probably thinking, how are we paying you, or what's happened here? And I said, listen, I just want to go and play football. I need to enjoy it again. I just need to drop down a level, enjoy it, and no matter what you have for me. And they obviously didn't really pay anything.
Yeah.
So the whole period went on, a brilliant time with Gavin. Felt great, and Filson was there. Some good players. Obviously Gavin's brother Mo was there. Because Gavin wasn't allowed to leave the house without Mo being there. He's a liability. But Mo scored serious amount of goals as well. I remember one day, Raymond Miller, do you remember Raymond Miller, the Northern Ireland kit man? No. Ballymena for a while, maybe, as well. Gentleman. But used to have this wee wooden trolley, and used to have the wee plastic cups with orange juice and then the jellies underneath and stuff like this. Gavin came in at half time going absolutely ballistic. And the best pitch in the country, Newforge, it was an absolute carpet. We're playing American Celtic or somebody right in there and just popped us off a park, and we were getting beaten. He's going ballistic. And it was like something out of a cartoon. So he's standing screaming, and he has this cup of orange squash in his hand. And and he throws it back like that's here. And it was like double cupped, and it hits it, and it wobbles up in the air and just turns there and just lands on his head. all the orange is running down his face, and nobody knew what to do, whether laugh at. And he went, there's nobody got anything to say. And he says, Gaff, you have 2 pips in your ear. I kind of broke it broke the awkwardness. And he loved it, and that was it. And really good time there, actually.
Yeah.
Played Linfield in the Irish Cup, and again, nil each, took him to a replay. Unbelievable Linfield team.
Yeah.
Good experience, but with all that going on, my head was elsewhere. Like, the difficulty of that period was like off the pitch, and you, baby, trying to deal with that. I didn't tell anyone about the money situation, so I'm paying the mortgage and all the bills on a credit card.
Right.
Because I have nothing coming in, because Glentoran was my job. That was the only job I had. And
so you're just bankrolling yourself.
Just doing it in the hope that this got sorted out. So it was never about making money or it was literally about just getting what I was contracted to get.
Yeah.
And it went on for a full season. I remember getting a call, obviously, from Larry saying we'd had to go into court a couple of times and meet them in the halls, and there was offers and stuff like this, and I just kind of suited back, and he took the lead.
Yeah.
He dealt with everything. He was unbelievable. I was just still dealing with the rejection, probably, and feeling the pressure of that. But I remember when the call came, and Larry basically said, "Listen, they've called us." It got to the stage where I think it was ready to go to court the next day or the day after for the hearing, and they want to pay you up in full. Thinking, like, why wait? Why did it get to that stage?
Yeah.
Why drag me through that? Why put themselves through that, ultimately knowing all this time? I think probably going back to he's a Glen man and he loves the club, and he'll not take us to court, and he'll not do this. And I take no pleasure in taking that case, like none whatsoever, and none in winning the case. It was settled, obviously, out of court. There wasn't a case to win.
But see, even as you're talking about that, why would they want that publicity? Surely that's just looking at them as in a bad light, saying that one of your players is taking you to court, and this is being dragged out for years. So if you've went back and forward there a few times, that's going to be in the papers 2 or 3 times, talking that Glentoran are back in court today with Michael over blah blah blah.
Yeah, I've actually got it as a cutout. Glenn slammed the door on Dougherty return or something, and that was the big headline, and the whole piece about it, somebody had put it out there. They went and signed James Taylor to bring him in as a number 2. He'd been playing for Dundalk at the time, and it was like
the big guy with the big doorman with a mustache.
Yep.
Is that him?
Yeah. So that was it. Like, and it was just, I just need this sorted out for me and my family, and to pay the bills off and to pay the credit cards off, and that's how it was. And the relief of getting that done was like nothing I've ever experienced.
Yeah.
Getting that finalised and just getting that again. It wasn't a how much money can we get, and taking real pleasure in this. And I hadn't fallen out with anyone. Nobody had fallen out with me. It was a weird thing, but getting it sorted just felt like, right, I can get things back on track now. And I'm going to go and play football again.